Good afternoon, and welcome to the November lecture of the Wonders of the World, or WOW, webinar series. The WOW program is sponsored by the Friends of the Lafayette Library and Learning Center, which is the all-volunteer organization that sells used books to support the Lafayette Library. I'm Ellen Reinges, the volunteer coordinator for the Friends WOW program. I'm now up to hosting 3 webinars, so please bear with me if something doesn't quite go right. I'm not an expert yet, maybe someday. Our lecture today is presented by the Woodson Art Museum in Wausau, Wisconsin. Since 1976, the Woodson has hosted an international juried art exhibit entitled Birds in Art, which opens each year in early September. Our speakers are Kathy Kelsey Foley, the museum's director, and Catie Anderson, the director of education. Before we begin, I'd like to bring you up to date on the Lafayette Library, which is one of the 26 branch libraries in the Contra Costa Library system. Lafayette is currently open for curbside pickup of books that have been placed on hold. I'd especially like to commend our library manager, Vicki Shaka, and her staff for the wonderful service they are providing to our community during these difficult times. I know the library staff misses seeing visitors inside the facility, but have told me they can often recognize the regulars underneath their masks. The Friends of the Library have traditionally hosted the WOW lectures and the Sweet Thursday author events in person. However, there are currently no public in-person events being held in the library complex. The Friends have now moved these programs online through 2 webinar series, Wonders of the World and Sweet Thursday. We are now in the process of scheduling new webinars, and here are a few coming attractions. On Wednesday, December 9th at 2 p.m., a docent from the Legion of Honor will give a lecture on the Last Supper in Pompeii, From the Table to the Grave. This exhibit is scheduled to open in spring of 2021. It was supposed to open earlier this year, but has been delayed in Europe. And I'm currently in the process of contacting additional museums for webinars for early 2021. Our next Sweet Thursday is tomorrow late afternoon at 5 p.m., where in Sweet Thursday we'll host author and historian Lindsay Chervinsky with her book, The Cabinet, George Washington and the Creation of an American Institution. The U.S. Constitution never established a presidential cabinet. The delegates to the Constitutional Convention explicitly rejected this idea. So how did George Washington create one of the most powerful bodies in the federal government? Attend this webinar tomorrow afternoon and find out. Then on January 21st of 2021, Sweet Thursday will host award-winning chef Bryant Terry, who has a book, Vegetable Kingdom, The Abundant World of Vegan Recipes. So if you like to cook, or maybe if you just like to eat and enjoy food from different cultures, you will enjoy this program. And did you miss one of our prior webinars? We now have a YouTube channel, or maybe you just want to watch one again. So this is where you can find all the webinars that the Friends have been permitted to record. It can be found at tinyurl.com/friends-LLC-YouTube. I'd also like to bring to your attention a program sponsored by the Lafayette Library and Learning Center Foundation. On December 4th, the foundation will be hosting award-winning portrait photographer Michael Colopy discussing his book, Courage. A few notes on Zoom webinar. The Friends webinars accommodate 500 attendees. Registration is unique. There is the possibility of oversubscription, which sometimes could happen, particularly with the lectures by the fine arts museums, which are very, very popular. And today we'd ask you to type any questions you have into the Q&A function. And at the end of the lecture, we'll select a few of these to answer. Now, I know that there are some people here who are not familiar with the Lafayette Library. And if you want to learn about how to find out about our events and sign up for them, there are a couple of different ways. One is to get onto the weekly email list that the foundation sends out to probably over 5,000 people, letting them know about upcoming events sponsored by the various organizations. And so if you go to llcf.org and /subscribe, you can get to the form where you can enter your name and address. Alternatively, if you want to find out about additional events sponsored throughout the Contra Costa County system, you can go to the Central Library website, ccclib.org. There is an events tab at the top, and then there's a click through for upcoming events, and that will take you to every scheduled event on the Contra Costa system. Now, that could be a bit overwhelming, so there are filters you can click on the side, such as by location or type of event or age group. Now, a few words about the Friends of the Library. For many, many years, we have sold donated used books to support the library and many of its functions. We also, we have a retail bookshop on the lower level of the library complex on the back on Golden Gate Way. And we also sell books through Amazon. The retail shop, books are typically priced between 50 cents and $3. And there's usually about 20,000 volumes on the shelves. And Amazon sells the higher value books. And what we do with the funds that we raise is support extended hours at the library, enable the library to purchase books and related materials. We support programming for the librarians as well as for ourselves, and we provide some support for the partners in the library complex. But we know this is not a normal year. The Friends Corner Bookshop closed in mid-March and opened on a limited basis in early September. Our Amazon store is now open and can be accessed via the Friends website, which I'll get to in a moment. But although we are currently selling books, we are still not able to take in book donations. If you're interested in finding out how you can purchase books to support the library, you could go to the Friends website at llcf.org/friends-book-shop. And that will have instructions on how to do the curbside pickup. And it also has the all-important button of how to reach our Amazon store. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers. Kathy Kelsey Foley has had the distinction of serving as the director of the Woodson Art Museum twice, her tenures separated by 7 years. She returned to the Woodson in March 1998. Kathy received her undergraduate degree in art history from Vassar College and a master's degree also in art history from Johns Hopkins University. Her museum training and corporate experience includes stints at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., the Dayton Art Institute, Northwestern University's Block Museum of Art, and the Gap, where she served as manager of corporate internal communications, during which time she lived here in the East Bay. Kathy was inducted as a fellow at the Wisconsin Academy of Sciences, Arts, and Letters in April 2014. And on Friday of last week, Kathy received the Association of Midwest Museums Distinguished Career Award. Katie Anderson is the Director of Education at the Woodson Art Museum. In this role, she develops interpretive content, hands-on projects, and educational materials for use during student visits and public programs. She also trains the museum's volunteer docent corps and facilitates the highly successful series of artist residencies undertaken each year to complement changing exhibitions. Katie offers after-school outreach programs and oversees the museum's audio tour app and its content. Katie has a bachelor's degree in interdisciplinary studies, including a focus on museum studies, environmental studies, and art from Beloit College. So let us welcome Kathy and Katie.
Hello. Hi, Ellen, thank you so much for that introduction. And Katie, are we good to go?
I have shared the screen.
Okay, Ellen, we're good to go at your end?
Yes, we are.
Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thanks to the marvel of Zoom to this afternoon's chat, Local to Global Travels Through Birds and Art 2020. We were really delighted when Ellen, who has been a longtime Woodson Art Museum friend and supporter, a friend of mine and the museum's, when she invited us to consider being part of the WOW program. We love the idea that your acronym referenced Wonders of the World, and we thought that the local to global connection was the perfect way to frame our approach to our flagship exhibition, Birds and Art. So we're going to get started by talking about that worldwide community, that being Birds and Art, with a short, very short video that actually was part of Friday's Association of Midwest Museums Awards program. And Ellen, thank you for mentioning that. It's still, well, it's deeply humbling. So let's move on to that short video.
Okay, I am just going to test one thing here, make sure that I am sharing with those optimized, and I am good. Okay.
Community for the Woodson Art Museum extends beyond our campus, city, county, and state. A reach crafted and honed through serendipity, cultivation, and care. The museum's 1976 inaugural exhibition, Birds of the Lakes, Fields, and Forests, gave way to Birds and Art, which over its 45-year history has presented the work of more than 1,000 artists. It's not an exaggeration to state that well over half have traveled from their worldwide homes to Wausau to participate in opening weekend festivities, akin to a giant family reunion. For some artists, the first U.S. city they visit is Wausau, and the warm, genuine welcome they receive during the exhibition opening weekend is life-changing. For many, it's also career-changing, reflective of the power and impact of the Birds and Art brand.
Okay.
So with that introduction, statistics, of course, run large here. With over 1,000 artists over this 45-year history, these fast facts are a helpful way to think about the exhibition. So Katie and I sit here in north central Wisconsin. In this year's exhibition, you see there are 8 Wisconsin artists and 6 California artists. Moving on to an international array, there are 32 international artists representing 14 countries. And in total, there are 114 artists in this 2020 exhibition. And just to give some context to that, some 560 or so artists submit to the exhibition, and they submit what we call current work, meaning for 2020, the artworks 2 and 3 dimensional, no photography, had to have been completed in 2018, 2019, and 2020. 3 jurors, typically museum curators and directors, review this work. From that 500 plus assortment of artists, 90 are selected by the jury. The balance come from those artists honored previously as past masters. So for those that are into numbers, that just sets the stage. So now let's begin our journey. Katie's going to take us just about 2.5 hours south of Wausau.
Okay, This is a very, very wonderful print, very large as well, by Wisconsin artist and printmaker Sue Medaris, and she hails from Mount Horeb, Wisconsin. And one of the things that I think is worth celebrating and recognizing with this original print is its scale, which is actually 60 inches tall and 48 inches wide. So this is 5 feet by 4 feet. And you can see there the picture of Sue in, her studio space, looking up at this wonderful print. And I think there is something to be said for scale and the difficulty of printing this large, and also the labor involved in printing this large. And Sue has really become quite a master at working at this size, so much so that she is getting better and better at wearing like drywall stilts to walk around and move around her space to ensure that she's not having to make contact with a fresh print on the ground, and she's able to kind of hover above it as she hand colors them. And this is a wonderful panoramic image of Sue's studio space, which I just said to Kathy earlier that I really have to invite myself to. And you can see her printing press there and the carved wood block in the press bed. So quite wonderful and imposing. And I think this style and scale is something that she's become quite well known for within the Birds and Art exhibition. We always are excited to see how big really something is, because the impact is huge. And from Wisconsin, we are going to head over to your neck of the woods and visit Etna, California.
And here we are introducing you to the work of another printmaker named Millie Whipplesmith Plank. The interesting thing in contrasting Sue Medaris's work and Millie's is that the vulture that you see, also a woodblock, a woodcut, on the left, you want to think that it's the size of that rooster, when in fact it is only 14 inches tall by 22 inches wide. It's a great work, but when you look at it here reproduced, it has the feeling of something much, much larger because of the rather ingenious composition in the way in which Millie has utilized the space, the way in which she's worked to the edges, actually off the edges, on three of the sides. So let's take a listen to how Millie talks about her work.
Hello everyone, my name is Millie Whipplesmith Plank, and I live in the mountains of Northern California on a working cattle ranch near the small town of Etna. The piece you are looking at is a woodblock print of a turkey vulture. Such a beautiful bird to have such a rotting name. Growing up on a ranch abundantly filled with domestic and wildlife, death was present. Vultures circling were assigned to check whether we had lost or were about to lose an animal. They also heralded the change of seasons, with clusters of dark spirals curling into the sky. What I enjoy about this piece is the use of color, the greens and blues, and the position of the wings giving a feeling of movement and just arrested flight. He's just about to pounce on something. What is that vulture looking at anyway? The use of red at the bottom of the picture is usually what would stop your eye taking it off the page, and that's where you would stay, but the dark pulls you back up into the wings. You know he's not going to be in that position long. But I didn't quite like the stark white of the paper, so I ran an uncarved block through the press, coated in a transparent raw sienna. If you look closely, you can see it printed the grain of the wood in the background, thus softening the contrast and bringing out the golds in the wings, which seemed to work for me. It was definitely a trial and error process, which is what I do a lot of in my printmaking. Such is the nature of the beast. I am often asked why printmaking. I must admit that it is time-consuming, difficult to correct mistakes, and unforgiving. Part of the answer is that I like the process. First, the development of the concept or idea, then the sketching to explore different compositional ideas. Next, experimentation with color. There's a lot of that. And then I do a full-size color rendering with gouache as a final test before transferring it to a Sheena plywood plate with tracing paper. The carving is done with Japanese tools, and for me, it is actually the most fun part of the process. The cuts have a rather joyful spontaneity, which often lead to delightful surprises, as well as the occasional oops. After carving, I roll ink onto the surface of the block, place a piece of paper on top, and hand crank it through an etching press. This carving, mixing of colors, rolling it onto the plate, then through the press, is repeated for each color. In Rapture, I tried to limit my colors to about 8 instead of the usual 10 to 15. I didn't want there to be as much blending in order to emphasize the feathers and the wings. Each time a print goes through the press, there's a grand reveal when you pull the print off the plate to see if it worked or not. Such an element of suspense. Thank you for sharing your time with me. It is an honor to be a part of the Birds and Art exhibition, and I know you will enjoy it.
There's nothing quite like hearing the artists speak about their work. And these videos, which comprise our audio tour app, they are lovingly and skillfully created and produced by Katie. She's really a master at just making these come to life. So we're going to stay actually in California, but we're showing you the distance from Wausau to Murphy's, California, where we'll meet artist Kathleen Dunphy. And Kathleen is a plein air painter, as you see in that very beautiful photo. And like many artists with whom we worked over the past months, the pandemic influenced her work significantly. She was really struggling in those first months. The deadline for submitting work to Birds and Art is this middle of April. And she was really, as she describes in her catalog statement, she says, "I found myself at a loss when I approached the canvas. The news seemed too bleak, the future too uncertain. After several failed attempts to produce anything of merit, I came across some sketches and photos from a trip last year to Sacramento National Wildlife Refuge. The grace of this elegant swan caught my eye, compelled me to go another round at the easel. This swan shows that hope prevails, nature continues to thrive, and that with faith and perseverance, all things are possible." It really has that uplifting. It's quite large and beautiful in the galleries. I think later we'll see a gallery image where you can catch a glimpse of Kathleen's Wing and a Prayer. We'll just take a quick look at her studio, quite different from both Millie's and Sue Medaris's. So we're going to stay in California with Katie.
Yes. And now we will be traveling virtually to San Francisco to visit an artist friend of ours, Tom Hill. And we selected this pair of scribble birds, as Tom has titled them, because not only is he an excellent representative of California, but they, I think, showcase the diversity of material and approach and aesthetic that one can experience during Birds and Art. And Tom has been in residence not once, but twice at the museum, lucky for us. And one of the fabulous residencies that he undertook last fall involved making sculptures with over 300 area students inspired by Mr. Potato Head, wherein the students received actual potatoes donated generously by a local farmer, and they used wire and paper and glue and tape, and they created their own sculptures, and we still have lovely images of those on our Facebook page. But we wish we were in the galleries with you, and to help simulate that, we are going to endeavor to view our sculpture in the round, as one should when visiting an art museum, view it from all sides. So let's take a look. One of the things I most appreciate about Tom's work is the sense of balance and activity and motion that he is able to convey. That diagonal line of that bird right there, to me, is absolutely fantastic. There's a level of interaction and conversation. I'm just going to click back to see the work itself. But having worked with Tom and all of these students, getting that visual balance is so critical. And he does that beautifully by having the sense of the density of these lines, the negative space between them, alongside and complemented by the solid forms of the painted wood, but also the literal physical balance of these birds, which is very tricky. And really, he must be commended for, because of his ability to have these sort of momentum-filled, chaotic, large forms on these spindly legs, which are quite strong and perfectly balanced. And I just love the way that one is looking up and one is focused down. It really, I think, has great narrative potential. So thank you, Tom. And here is a quick look inside his studio with canine companion, studio assistant included. But I think what's really wonderful is to see the diversity of materials and work surfaces and tools used by these artists. And these images are actually part of another exhibition that complements Birds and Art this fall, From My Space to Yours. And we were all, quite sad that we couldn't welcome all of our Birds and Art friends and community members for the opening weekend this year during the pandemic. So in lieu of that, we wanted to make those connections between the communities. So we invited Birds and Art artists to share photographs of their creative workspaces, which resulted in that exhibition. And if you'd like to check out those photos, they're all available on our website, along with brief statements from the artists about their studios. I think I covered all of that. Okay. Yeah, and now we are moving on, and Kathy, we're going to go to India.
That's right. We're going to quickly jet around the world to India and meet Chirag Thumbar and his great hornbills. And you can imagine, we don't see hornbills in Wisconsin. I don't think you see them in California either. And so there's an exotic nature to images that take us out of our familiarity zone, not so much our comfort zone, but our familiarity zone. And Chirag has a marvelous way of conveying the density of the forest canopy, but giving us the detail of these, to me, rather exotic birds, and creating that sharp diagonal, and again, not unlike the way in which Tom's birds interact. You have here in a flat plane surface in 2 dimensions, the kind of interaction that Katie so beautifully articulated in Tom's birds. So it's fun for us to be able to work around the globe, and to be conscious as well of the fragile nature, the threatened nature, really, of birds like the hornbill. So the exhibition has, I think, appeal on multiple levels relative to interest bird lovers, art lovers, and those concerned with endangered species and environmental perils. So we're going to bring it all together in a work like like Chirag's. Let's see, we're staying on the other side of the globe, and moving on to Sri Lanka.
Can I
Sure.
add one thing I really enjoy as well is the entirety of the picture plane is filled, and the lush and dense foliage of the upper canopy, and yet he has given us enough depth of field that we don't feel claustrophobic in that environment, which I think is, skillfully done, but also due in large part to the variety of brush strokes and how tight he has kept these areas, and also, of course, the lightness of the background in the far upper corner. So I think hats off to Chirag, because that is
Chirag.
To achieve.
In fact, Katie, I'm just thinking as you're saying that next time we talk about this image, I think we need to pair it with our Martin Johnson Heath hummingbird.
Yeah.
Because it's the
Very
same, he does the same kind of dense canopy, but near front visor bearer hummingbirds in a way that's quite similar. I wonder if Chirag was influenced by Heath. Okay, let's move to Sri Lanka.
Yes, and away we go. And to one of the artist names that for staff has been the most difficult to pronounce, Shamindra De Silva Abebekwame from Sri Lanka, who is a first-time artist, and he is a painter, a photographer, does graphic design work, and we were really excited to welcome an artist from Sri Lanka, I believe for the first time in the exhibition's history. And we do have the benefit of hearing from Shamindra as well. But before we do, I just wanted to share something that I truly enjoy about this painting, which is if you were to isolate sort of the area in the lower right of the canvas, to me, it's very reminiscent of a Georgia O'Keeffe flower painting, sort of uncurling, and the shapes themselves, again, if you were to block part of it out, really could represent so many things, and the forms and lines, the value range, the hue are well done, because that's visually interesting and almost can be abstracted. I also have to give Shamindra credit that he did not spell out his entire name in his signature, and that he very discreetly tucked it, Shami, right in the feathers in the corner. So good job, Shamindra. Sometimes that gets a bit much. So let's hear from him.
My name is Chamindra De Silva Abebekwame from the Paradise Island of Sri Lanka. At a very early age, my passion and love for nature was flamed by the vibrant fauna and flora that surrounds the country. Growing up amongst the rich, multicultural and religious atmosphere taught me to respect all life, including the wild. As a child, my hobby and passion for art was greatly encouraged by my mother, who is still my biggest fan. And as time passed, I honed my style and technique to what it is now. Fast forward to the present day, the natural world is threatened and going extinct. It is heartbreaking to watch this happen. As retaliation, my goal is to encourage conservation and protection of the wild through my work. Inspiration for my work has many forms, even a breathtaking photo by the very talented wildlife photographer Chris Ang that deeply touched me and resulted in the birth of Ruffled, a magnificent whooper swan in all its glory, preening its feathers, the reflection of the warm sunlight in its eyes, piercing through the freezing cold weather, giving the scene a magnificent tonal contrast through its monotone freezing hues. Irrespective of my shortcoming of not having first-hand experience with this bird, I worked closely with Chris and researched for better insight into the lifestyle of this creature. As I start the painting with a rough pencil sketch, and blocking in the basic colors is a fairly speedy process. Next, once I have covered the canvas, I start the molding process, and finally the detailing, which constitutes for 2/3 of the time taken to complete the whole painting. All in all, it took me close upon 2 months to finally finish this beautiful piece.
Okay. And a shot of Shamindra's studio. Something that I think is interesting, having rewatched that video, is that he kind of waited for that cherry on top of the reflection of the eye towards the end of the painting, where I hear so many artists say that they near finish an eye first whenever they're painting, because they're sort of seeing the soul of that subject, and that's inspires them to keep working through the piece. But Shamindra's studio. And
Okay, we're now going to jet off to Sweden and to the island of Gotland and take a look at the work of Johannes Navala. And what's especially interesting to me, to Katie, about the way in which Johannes talks about this very beautiful watercolor and colored pencil work, the austere composition that just draws you in. But the fact that he was influenced to turn to this medium after being here in Wausau in 2019. And in selecting the work that we wanted to share today, the videos, the range of work and the travels around the globe, we also made a point of trying to convey the depth of influence that the exhibition has had on a worldwide community of artists. And Johannes, I think, really captured that in his statement and in this work, that it speaks to the intensity of the opening weekend, and I mean that intensity in a good sense, that artists are learning from one another, that the camaraderie, the collegiality that take place here are really powerful, and we'll see that in other work in addition to Johannes's. So let's listen to him talk about his work in a pretty terrific way.
Sorry, there we go.
This is me, how I look when I paint. No more, no less. It's me, Johannes Navala. I'm speaking from my studio in Gotland, Sweden. It's a wonderful day in the middle of the summer and the sun is shining from a blue sky. Gotland is an island in the middle of the Baltic Sea with fantastic nature and extremely rich bird life. This is the place where my bird paintings come to life. My inspiration for my bird paintings over the years has mostly been from days spent along the shore, where I try to catch fragments of bird life and understand the environment they live in. From my studio, it's only a short ride to some of my favorite places where I can sit by the shoreline, observing, sketching, taking photos, and writing notes. Many of my spots are truly amazing places, especially when the light plays against the landscape and seascape in so many different ways. My artistry has evolved from these places and these observations, but there is much more to it. I put things from my life into my artwork. I continually seek inspiration and work to develop my skills and find new ways to express myself. This has been the road I traveled as a painter. The pheasant shadow line was influenced partly by the fantastic colleagues I met at the Woodson Art Museum last fall. They, their artwork and the exhibition really touched me. I was fascinated by all the details in the paintings, graphics and sculptural work. Back home I asked myself, is there something from this experience that might influence my own artistic expression? In October I sharpened the watercolor pencils that mostly collected dust in a jar and started a new project, focus on detail. At first I was skeptical as not much happened that pleased me, but I gave the pencil time, and I was rewarded. I was stuck already after my first attempt. About 20 works later I was back painting in oil, acrylic and watercolor. But from now on the watercolor pencil will be included more often in my techniques.
Really a nice tribute, and it shows you that camaraderie of images in the video from the opening weekend. So we're now going to go a bit south to Spain and meet artist Fran Alvarado. Fran is a sculptor and an artist who works in a most interesting, fascinating style to me, in utilizing found objects as well as cast bronze, almost in a way kind of assemblages. And he is especially concerned about the environment. His works always, or have in our experience with him, included commentary about the fragility of the world around us. This particular piece is a tribute to a friend who had died, and he talks about that quite poignantly in the catalog. He references the rectangle as a limited space that mankind leaves for nature. I tend to think about it more as a frame and a way in which to view his work, but I think better that I defer to Fran. The butterfly is a reference to his friend's soul. So again, a very personal statement, and an interesting work to look at, as with all sculpture, in the round, which we'll do just quickly. And just take a note about how your response or interaction with the piece changes as we move around, when we can see not just a face forward view, but a back and side view as well. It really makes for a much richer, fuller experience. Katie, I'm somewhat concerned about time, so let's dash to Maryland.
Yeah, let's dash to Maryland.
Let's dash to Maryland, right.
And Walter Mataya's work, No Country for Old Frogs. And we have two images of it here. And I think I will go ahead and play. We have another 360, and I will just talk briefly about some of the things that I quite enjoy about this work. So in this 360, in the round view, I think you can really appreciate Walt's sensitivity to balance and uniformity in the lines that he has, where you have multiple lines complementing one another. So the angles of the green heron's beaks and their gestures, which are replicated in the bent reeds that you see. He also does a beautiful job with positive and negative space, kind of the negative space between, a reed or the solid mass of a bird being very similar to and echoing the actual forms of the subject. And Walt is very, very good at doing this. And it's sort of, for me at least, a textbook example. And I did include these three because I wanted to just annotate a little bit to show some of those positive and negative spaces that I so enjoy, and some of the lines. So for me, first, we have this wonderful kind of bent open reed, and the whole thing is filled with triangles. But this one replicates to me the triangle that you would associate with a heron's open beak. But the entire work itself is a nice big triangle. And here in the middle, we also have on display some of the softer forms that we can see. You have this wonderful profile here. And then this general shape here, this negative space, is really not that unlike the swoop of that heron's body and that sort of soft line. Similarly here, this angle of the second heron is also very similar to the natural sort of silhouette line of that bird. I just think when we consider negative space and complementary lines and forms, it of course extends to sculpture as well. And Walt just does a beautiful job of it. So I'm going to undo those lines so they don't continue to hang out on the screen. And we will move on to,
I think we're going to New Mexico.
yes, to visit our master artist. And I'm going to have to take one more of those off. There we go. Okay.
All right. Well, I mentioned earlier that each year we, almost each year, in some anniversary years, this has not happened, but we typically designate an artist to elevate to the stature of master artist. And this year we recognize Timothy David Mayhew, a quite remarkable painter and draftsman who works in New Mexico, now calls New Mexico home, born and raised in Michigan. And Timothy is a Renaissance man of immense talents, and one might even say obsessive compulsive. Katie, is that fair? In the nicest way, we say that. He is fixated on old master drawing techniques, but not just techniques, but the mediums itself, and spent years searching to be able to quarry naturally occurring chalks. And these are the materials that Raphael and Leonardo and Michelangelo used in their drawings, as well as some 18th century artists. And Timothy has become really at the kind of reigning expert in these materials, in these mediums, and in being able to, on a very limited basis, quarry them today in various locations. So he's served as a consulting curator to the Getty for an 18th century French drawing exhibition, and to Cleveland for their Raphael exhibition, cut short this past winter, spring, because of the pandemic. And we get to claim him as our 2020 master artist, of course, in a kind of unfulfilled way, because he was unable to be here and unable to give his master presentation, which we are hoping will be possible in the coming September. But let's take a listen to Timothy talking about about the drawing that you see here.
I think just Timothy, to me, is the quintessential example of an artist's practice beginning so far before they ever put, mark making material to paper, or, paintbrush to canvas. For him, the entire arc of working with these materials is quite at the core of his process as a maker. So let me just go back here and we'll hear from Timothy.
This metal point drawing, entitled Right Side Study of a Juvenile and Adult Sandhill Crane, has a rather lengthy name, but that is for a very good reason. During my field studies, I typically create dozens of drawings of a particular animal, often over the course of several days. Rather than assigning random names to these drawings, such as crane drawing number 1 through crane drawing number 40, I adopted the naming convention used by major museums to title Old Master drawings using descriptions that distinguish drawings from each other. Traditional metal point drawing materials, which included pointed styluses cast from gold, silver, and bronze, along with the important abrasive coating needed to prepare the surface of paper or parchment, are ideal for drawing in the back country. The lines and marks of the drawing are tiny particles of metal shorn from the tip of the stylus, which become wedged so tightly between the abrasive particles of the drawing's prepared surface that they cannot be easily erased and do not smear. This traditional fine-pointed stylus drawing technique evolved over centuries into a complex visual vocabulary of curved and straight parallel hatching lines to create lighter and darker tones and to describe the fall of light on three-dimensional planes. In October of 2006, I gave a lecture at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. on traditional 11th to 17th century metal point drawing materials and techniques. At the end of the lecture, the National Gallery's director tasked the gallery's curators, conservators, and scientists to create an exhibition solely devoted to metal point drawings. The scholarly research and complex logistics that took many years, during which I worked as a consultant and gave additional lectures at the National Gallery. The resulting exhibition was entitled Drawing in Silver and Gold, Leonardo to Jasper Johns, which opened at the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. in the spring of 2015, and then traveled to the British Museum for exhibition later that fall.
I talked about the chalks, but in fact forgot that we were doing metal point. Okay, we're going to go back to Virginia for a bit and do two things in kind of wrap up and then take some questions, I hope. Introducing you here to artist Mary Cornish. And as you can see, a mid-pandemic photo of Mary from the opening day, September 12th of the 2020 Birds and Art exhibition. And to celebrate that opening, the museum sent a box, a kind of care package box to all 114 artists. And there were a number of items inside that box, including a mask we asked them to decorate, a tumbler for a beverage of their choice, Wise Owl potato chips, a nest made out of a paper bag in which sat chalk eggs, a kind of tip of the hat to Timothy, and a button that Mary is wearing of a detail from her artwork in the 2020 exhibition, The Bone Collector, a California Condor. We thought we had to include that image for our California audience. And Mary's specialty is what she calls ugly birds. And she's made kind of quite a name for herself in finding these absolutely extraordinary, almost, well, kind of prehistoric images. I think about her work as bird portraiture. And if you close your eyes and think about a great Rembrandt portrait and think about, visiting the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco and the great 17th century portraits of Rembrandt, Frans Hals, and others, you could almost see except for that light background, which you wouldn't see in a 17th century Dutch portrait, you can see a great influence to Mary's work. So I'm just going to show you quickly my own photographs of a California condor just taken about a year ago while I had the great luck of being in Zion National Park. And well, just a personal little thrill to be able to look through a spotting scope and see that the enormity of just the enormity of those birds and also the rocks, although my photo taken with my cell phone camera. So we'll stay in Virginia, and Katie's going to introduce us to our last favorite artist for today,
And
Spencer Tinkham.
I just have to, because it's me and I miss talking to people in the galleries, have to point out what I really love about the Bone Collector is the beautiful reflection of that warm glow of sunlight that you can see just under the lower mandible beak, that sort of line that then of course picks up in some of those really lovely loose sort of downy looking feathers. But that light addition is fabulous. Okay, sorry, Spencer.
No, that's great.
So Spencer is an artist working in Virginia, and not unlike Fran Alvarado, who's using a variety of materials, Spencer similarly adopts that practice. And he has his wonderful sculpture, Almost Ate It, which features a broken skateboard deck, electrical and piano wire, basswood, onyx beads, and chicken coop siding, which, looking at that, probably the only thing you might be able to identify would be part of that skateboard. But we'd like to just close with this lovely video from Spencer telling us about this sculpture.
Hello, I'm Spencer Tinkham, and I'm from Norfolk, Virginia. It has long been said that the environment that you grow up in shapes the person you become. As an artist, my environment is my medium. I work in mostly found materials, and each sculpture is a direct product of the world around me. I became fascinated with roadrunners when I attended college in Texas. However, it wasn't until the 2019 Birds in Art that I became inspired to make one. I was awaiting my turn in the project postcard line, and there I was struck by a bronze roadrunner sculpture that Walt Mattia had made. He captured the movement, curiosity, and hunger of a roadrunner so well, and right after the event, I sketched out roadrunner ideas on a napkin on the bus. Just about everyone knows how to skate or surf where I'm from. Nothing lasts forever, and skateboards get pushed to their breaking point quite frequently. Skateboards have these beautiful, dyed, colored wood layers. I felt like broken skateboards were the perfect medium to depict the eccentric personality, relentless speed, and frazzled feathers of a roadrunner quite well. For several days, I stared at a stack of broken skateboards, trying to figure out how I would approach the roadrunner sculpture. I obsessed about roadrunners, drawing them all day long, anywhere I was, including the car mechanic shop when I was waiting to get my car inspected. I initially decided to create a sprinting roadrunner. However, the more I looked at it, the more I realized it was lacking a lot of personality. After a few days of sketching on my iPad, I came up with a roadrunner chase scene. I didn't know what it was chasing or any other details, but I knew it looked cool and had more personality than my initial idea. The eastern collared lizard is the second reptile I had ever created. The only reason I chose it was because I felt like its colors complemented the colors of the broken skateboards pretty well. I then quickly got to work on the roadrunner. The tail is one of my most favorite aspects of the sculpture. It's made out of old metal, and underneath is a collage of skate stickers. Each feather represents a special person or a special memory that I have. I'll give you a hint. The kangaroo sticker that you see represents some new friends that I met from Australia at the 2019 Birds in Art artist event. I greatly admire their work and am thankful for their friendship. Most of my pieces are hollow and have a special message inside of them. I feel like it gives the work a soul. In the Roadrunner, I wrote Psalm 23:4. It states, "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me." I felt like it was pretty fitting for the Roadrunner chasing down the lizard. However, once the COVID virus spread, I realized that it was a perfect time capsule for the world and time in which we live in. Almost Ate It was the last piece that I made in my old studio. Towards the end, When I looked at the sculpture, I kept thinking, something about this piece isn't as good as it can be. My wife Megan quickly honed in and saw that the scrub grass wasn't as scrubby as it needed to be. She did some magic and got it looking great, and right then and there, I took the piece out and turned the lights off in my studio one last time.
Yay, Spencer.
Hello.
Okay, and just Spencer gets another little shout out here because he was cleaning up his studio, and before he let his family throw out all of the materials you see pictured here, he sent an email message to the museum, which landed in my inbox, asking if we were interested at all in seeing or keeping these materials. And of course I said, yes, Spencer, duh, I want to see materials, because they offer great educational, teaching tools. And what resulted was myself and Dave Jones and Shannon Pushner at the museum created the story of a sculpture. So we took all of these items that he shipped to the museum, along with a list explaining what they were. And it sort of walks you through a process, not in a linear fashion, but just really an explosive like look of creativity and what goes into making a sculpture like that. And we thought it was a fun installation as well.
Katie, I think we should, before we move on to our closing slide, let's just, do you want to talk about when you brought the box of Spencer's things into my office?
Yeah, I actually probably have the things in question right over there in my bag. But so Spencer is not only very generous with sharing materials and images with the museum, he also has a good sense of humor. So he sent this huge box with everything wrapped up, attention Katie Anderson, and it arrived and I opened it up, and perfectly placed and adhered within the flaps of the box were 2 fake cockroaches. So when I opened them up, and it was funny, I didn't notice them right away. And then maybe a minute or two later, I looked and was like, oh, and picked them up. But then I, of course, promptly brought the box down to Kathy's office and asked her to go ahead and open and see what Spencer sent us. And she yelped and leaped back maybe there. So Spencer, definitely got to scare not only me, but many other staff members with his joke. So,
but it does really beautifully speak to the intensity of our relationships with artists that we have the privilege of getting to know. And Birds and Art is a phenomenon, and it continues to morph and grow, and we nurture it, and it nurtures us. The relationships, the friendships, whether staff, whether visitors, members, donors, supporters, participants who come on the opening weekend. It's really quite hard almost to describe. I think in our selection of artists and images and videos, we've given you, I hope, a flavor of this quite extraordinary exhibition, and how fortunate we are to be in North Central Wisconsin and able to touch the world through this exhibition. You see here hours. We're currently closed because the pandemic is surging here, and proactively closed really to keep everyone as safe as possible. But there's tremendous content on our website. The catalog, I hope you can see a fully illustrated 134-page catalog. That's something you can find on our website as well. Katie's showing that now. So we've run a little bit over that 5 o'clock mark, just a few minutes. I think we traveled pretty quickly at the end, but we're grateful for your attention, your participation, your interest. We're happy to answer questions. Ellen, if that would be helpful, and however we can have fun.
Well, thank you very much, Kathy and Katie. Let's see, am I on? So I have a few questions that I'm seeing here. Does the show travel, and has it or will it visit California?
So the show does travel. Half the exhibition travels. 60 works, 60 2- and 3-dimensional works do travel. And the 2020 exhibition is going to be heading east to the Newington Cropsey Foundation, which is in Hastings-on-Hudson, for March, April, and May. And then up to Maine to the Wendell Gilley Museum from the middle of June to the middle of August, down to Stamford, Connecticut from the early September and October to the Stamford Museum and Nature Center, and then traveling cross-country to Fullerton, California, and to the Arboretum there, where it will be on view in December of 2021 and through the end of January 2022. So perhaps for those of you in the Bay Area, overnight trip down to Fullerton might be in order.
Thank you. Let's see. So there was a question early on, which might have been the Sue Medaris, of how long did it take to do? Do you have any idea?
Well,
It was one of the early ones.
Sure. Sue, I mean, Kathy, do you have a specific time? I mean,
no, I suspect that takes her many weeks. It's a large block to carve.
And she's using not just hand tools, but Dremel tools and power tools to work with it. But I will say that pretty much that question, how long did it take to make that, is one of the most frequently asked, I think, relative to viewing artworks. And that's simply because time is a commodity that we all know and understand. But also I will offer the somewhat cheeky but helpful response that many artists give, which, okay, I'm 32, and if you ask me how long it took to make something, I could tell you it took 32 years. Because an artist, the entirety of their experience and their making process really does go into every work that they create, and all of the skills and trials and errors are poured into every new artwork. So, yeah.
Here's another one. So what is the process that most of the non-sculptors use, if they tend to use one processor? Field sketches, photos, memories.
It's a mix.
I think kind of an interesting question, a very interesting question. With almost no exception, all these artists sketch and draw. I don't know, Katie, there might be a few who don't. I would be very surprised. And to that end, the Woodson Art Museum has an exceptional drawing collection that has been largely built thanks to gifts from artists of their sketches, sketchbooks, finished sketches, early sketches, doodles, napkin drawings, envelope drawings, I mean, just anything and everything. And I typically, relative to that question, we didn't show the work of Bob Bateman, and he may be familiar to many of you who are on the Zoom program. But Bob is an extraordinary Canadian artist who has been a friend of the Woodson Art Museum's for many, many years, since he's been in every exhibition since the second one in 1977. He was honored as a master in 1982. He is never without his sketchbook. And to that point, he doesn't drive. He knows how to, but he doesn't drive. His wife, Birgit, does all of the driving so that he can always be looking and sketching. So in terms of two-dimensional artists, they work in many, many mediums, and the exhibition includes acrylic work, oil work, watercolor, pastel, etchings, dry point, woodblock, serigraphy. But I think drawing and sketching is something that is that spans the pool of artists.
I think for some of them, it would be fair to say that they truly experience and interpret the world through the pencil in their hand and
Yeah.
what is your recording. and
Good way to say it.
So on your website, how long do you anticipate having information on this year's Birds and Art? I know there are the some of the little artist videos and the catalog, and then also someone wants to know, can they buy a catalog from you?
Oh, they absolutely can buy a catalog online if you just go to our website, which is our initials, lywam.org. It's very easy to navigate, and we happily ship. And but we keep all of our exhibition information archived on our website. So Birds and Art, because of the pandemic and being closed currently, we have shuffled our exhibition schedule and extended the 2020 Birds and Art exhibition through February 21st, 2021. And our hope is that we'll be able to open when it's safe to do so. But we're hoping that there will be many more weeks for local and regional visitors to take in this exhibition. Another opportunity on our website is our weekly blog, and which is called Woodson Wanderings. And there are 7 of us that blog in rotation. And you can subscribe to that blog. Again, from our homepage, you'll find a free subscribe link. And which is a source of great pride, because we've been blogging every Wednesday for 12 years and have never missed a Wednesday, not even when Christmas falls on a Wednesday.
The videos that are referenced are available forever on our YouTube channel as well. So if one was to download the app, you can enjoy the app content, natively on your smartphone device, but you can enjoy past Birds and Art app videos and collection related videos on our YouTube channel. So they're there and they will stay there.
And there have been a few questions about seeing the recording of today's presentation. So when this is over and it's processed, I will, download it to my computer and do a little massaging, and then it will go on the Friends of the Library YouTube channel, which is tinyurl.com/friends LLC YouTube, but that's going to be in the follow-up email that Zoom sends out tomorrow. And also I'll be sending the link to the Woodson, so they may want to download it and maybe edit out some of the Lafayette parts of it that wouldn't be necessarily relevant to all of their audiences. So it will be available in the future. I think there was another question about getting a list of the artists that you mentioned today, and I would probably recommend that someone visit the Woodson website, because you'll see all of those people plus all the others.
We could easily provide, their names will all come up in the recording,
right?
Through the PowerPoint. I just took a look at the Q&A as well, Ellen, and saw someone was asking who Leigh Yawkey was, and I'm happy to answer that question just quickly, which is that Leigh Yawkey Woodson and her husband H. Woodson were prominent Wausau community members, philanthropists, and really early 20th century venture capitalists. Leigh Yawkey's father was a lumber baron, and they lived actually north of Wausau when Leigh was a young girl. And then as she grew up, they moved to Wausau because they thought the North Woods was too rough and tumble. And she grew up in a beautiful classic revival home that was inspired by the Columbian Exposition, her parents having visited Chicago for the Columbian Exposition. And it was subsequently remodeled by the Great Prairie School architect, George Mayer. Leigh married a man named H. Woodson. He was a lawyer from Kansas City. They commissioned George Mayer to build their home across the street from Mom and Dad's. The Yawkey house is now a house museum, and the Woodson home is now the Woodson History Center. They're both operated by the Marathon County Historical Society. Mr. and Mrs. Woodson had 4 children, 3 surviving daughters, and it was the 3 daughters that created the museum in memory of their mother. They started talking about it in the late 1960s, and they filed incorporation papers on Valentine's Day in 1973, and we opened in September of 1976. The interesting thing is that Leigh was an only child and a daughter, and she and Mr. Woodson had just 3 surviving daughters. So there are many, many grandchildren and great-grandchildren of Leigh Yawkey Woodson's, none of whom have either the Yawkey or Woodson surname. Just sort of an interesting philanthropic kind of little tidbit.
So maybe taking a couple more questions and then it will be
Sure.
time.
answer Spencer Tinkham's question.
Okay,
Yes, I
so you
saw
think,
this
right, yeah, that was what I
answer.
was going to ask.
So Spencer asking, what do we think about when designing and grouping works in an exhibition? Do we make a mini model for where walls and works go? While I don't have the pleasure of installing birds and art, but at this point, for Jane, certainly it's very much, there's a natural rhythm, and Shannon as well, when they are installing works, and they are very cognizant of having works complement one another, sometimes in, very direct communication, even based on where they are placed, but also sight lines in the space and things that will pull you through a room or into another gallery, of course, are really crucial. They are aware too of allowing sculptures whenever possible to be viewed in the round, and to have, we want every artwork to always look its best and in our galleries, and that's a point of pride, but also to showcase the fantastic artwork artists generously share with us. And they have made a model before, but I don't think that was for a different project. That's not usually done. However, when traveling exhibitions are brought into the museum, they do have sometimes more of a layout that is prescribed or suggested from the lending institution or the exhibition organizer. And otherwise, I think we rely very much on the creative eyes and talents of the curators. I hope that helps, Spencer, and thanks for joining.
And one last question before we sign off, but since Spencer sent you the box of materials and there was reference to closing a studio, someone has asked, is Spencer still creating at a new studio?
Yes, he is. He is.
We hope so.
He is.
We hope he's hard at work on his on submissions for 2021.
And I hope that we're able to come visit you in 2021. And if not then, I'm sure it will be 2022.
Oh, Ellen, I hope so. We miss you.
So I'd like to thank both of you and all the other people behind the scenes for all the effort I know that you've gone through to put this presentation together today. And I appreciate that you were willing to step out of Wisconsin into California, because one of the things that Zoom does create is the opportunity to bring museums from farther afield to speak to our community.
I think we're really, these are the silver linings at a very difficult time for all of us. And we've done a couple of different programs, and we hear from people all over the world who are looking at our Facebook page or looking at our website, accessing activity guides, art kits. I mean, it's really quite heartwarming. And I think it's important to stay positive and to look for those silver linings at a time when the things that we have traditionally loved aren't possible. So check out our website, subscribe to our blog. We're having a lot of fun here, although we wish you could all be here. And most important, stay healthy and stay safe.
Well, thank you very much, Kathy and Katie.
Thank you so much.
Our pleasure.
Okay.
Have a good evening.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.